Welcome to Mum Days, a beautiful collective of mamas and experts sharing wisdom, inspiration, and life hacks to support us on this journey through the hazy days of motherhood. Welcome to the Mum Days podcast. I'm your host, Holly Lowe, and we are back into our theme of dealing with trauma and everything that involves. And I have to say, I am learning so much as we walk through this. And maybe it's a little bit selfish, but a whole bunch of this has benefited me. I'm hoping it's benefited everyone who's listening. I know, actually, I shouldn't say that. I know it has. I've been getting messages from so many women saying, these are all such needed conversations. So we're in the right place. And today I have the privilege of talking to Janessa Finley. I was just sharing with her that I was enjoying so much just going through her website and looking at what you do and what you offer. And again, it just mixes so gorgeous with what we're doing with this healing process in our bodies of things that maybe we haven't even noticed or known could be the roots. So welcome to the podcast. I'm really grateful that you took time to be with us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you so much for having me, Holly. And thank you more than anything else for doing this trauma series. Super passionate about it. I get excited about it in a good way to be able to bring healing and relief to people because trauma, the stats on trauma is everywhere. And what we do know is that hurt people, and they don't intend to, but it's a cycle that continues. So giving moms the information, tools, and knowledge to break the cycle is going to be a ripple effect that will benefit everybody. So I could not be more thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that because that was a good part of other conversations we've had is that whole generational effect going both ways, right? I mean, we might be dealing with generational trauma ourselves or need to really look at some of that, but we also have that impact on, the little people that we're growing as moms and how we can, I think, really recreate their futures, recreate our past through them in a sense for the better. So I love that we're having these conversations. It's
absolutely
super important, right?
It is.
I really want to focus on the physical stuff. Is that okay? We chat a little bit more about the physical aspects and what trauma looks like in our bodies. Does that work?
Yes. I had prepared to talk about repressed memories.
Yes.
So that's a little different direction, but it kind of all comes together.
No, that's totally fine. I want to go there. I want to go to that idea of repression. But I think a lot of what we do is, especially as moms, is we ignore the symptoms.
Oh, great. I have
right?
symptoms.
Yeah, it's more that idea that I think, and we're going to repress because that is a big part that we haven't touched on. And that's a really big part of that. But leading into that, I think the idea that we have symptoms that we ignore or symptoms that we self-medicate or symptoms that in our physical body that really should be or could be that wake-up call to repressed trauma. I think that's sort of that root knocking and saying, hey, this lower back pain could be related to this, or, this breathing issue could be related to this. It might be time to take a look at something beyond the physical symptoms. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it's a huge part of trauma work. Summarizing it into a nice, neat list of what symptoms look like for people is really hard, especially if we are looking at the physical being and the physical body. Trauma emotions manifest into all types of discomfort, or what I like to say, dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so broad. It's very, very broad.
Yeah.
You are right on track, though, with I have this pain in my body. I've gone to maybe a chiropractor, a doctor, physical therapy. I have exhausted all of the things and I'm not healing. Why is that? That's a great time to start looking into what's the mind-body connection to that. Because there is likely a mind-body connection to it, whether it's simply emotional component or something deeper, such as trauma. I tend to think of trauma in a stack of a lot of emotions compressed into one experience that gets stored somewhere within the physical body.
Right.
And so it is important to look at those symptoms that we're having, the physical pain, whatever that might look like. Additionally, for traumas, specifically repressed traumas, but traumas in general, there are unexplained reactions to maybe a specific person over and over. Just not really sure why, but it's there.
Yeah.
Lack of ease in specific places. I worked with one client whose trauma occurred in a car. They have never driven a car because there's such a great sense of dis-ease with the car associated to that experience. We can become neutral to the experiences that we have in life, even the traumas, while they're very painful, while they can be overwhelming. We don't have to allow that to rob us of the conveniences in life, such as driving, the ability to drive. Other symptoms can look like extreme emotional shifts, being on a roller coaster, not really sure why or where that's coming from. Anxiety is a pretty common symptom as well from trauma. And the childish reactions we see, especially with repressed traumas and memories, but all trauma across the board. The situations that happen at the age they happen, it can stunt us into continuing to try to process that situation through that capacity of age, for lack of a better way of saying it, but just being stuck there in that space. Constant exhaustion, that's a little bit more of a physical symptom that people will see oftentimes with those trauma responses. And just being unable to cope in what would otherwise be a stressful situation that we should be able to cope and move through, and having, perhaps a devastated response or a response that just does not match the situation at hand. Right. And we can easily consciously see that, but we can't figure out why that is occurring. So those are some of the symptoms we work with and map out. And I encourage people to watch for, if that speaks to you, let's get curious about the mind-body connection with those and what's going on inside.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a good bunch to kind of wake up to and to take a look at. And it's funny, even as you were talking, I can easily look at people in my family or in my life who I know are struggling with these issues because I'm outside of the situation, can see it. But when it's myself, I almost need someone outside of me to say, this could be what's going on, right? And you were talking about, when you've gone down all these other avenues and it's not being solved with maybe a physical symptom or maybe anxiety or things like that. And you've tried all the things, that repression of what you've boxed in and put all those emotions and jammed them into that one little space that our bodies aren't meant to hold on to. There's definitely going to be some output in some form. So I'll tell you one of my little stories is not mine, actually. My husband, so he moved from Hong Kong when he was quite little and didn't speak English. It was obviously a huge move. I think he was around 7, but he doesn't remember it. He doesn't remember much right before that. He doesn't remember much about that process. And yeah, I know how, as a mom now with littles, and I, as someone who took child psychology for years in school and things like that, I can only imagine what that was like to, suddenly change countries and to be put into an English-speaking school in the middle of a school year with no one, And so there's so many things that I see come up as triggers that are easy to trace back. And yet I know if I say that to him, he'd be like, whatever. It just happened. It's whatever. Like in his sister's family, not that it was whatever. I'm sure it was hard, but a lot of people don't look at some of those just life events as traumatizing because we think trauma has to be this big dramatic incident. And it can be, but it can be something as simple as you had a baby and things did not go as planned. It could be something as simple as a major move, or changing schools. So I think it's good that you said that because sometimes it's easier to see it when you're out of the situation. You can kind of pinpoint those things, but when we're in it, you kind of get lost in some of that, right?
It is challenging to hold space for ourselves in that healing capacity. it is so much easier to have awareness of other people and tracking other people's patterns. I look at behavior and patterns, and most people can tell me how their significant other will respond when they're upset, or what might rob their best friend of a night's sleep, what worries them, what concerns them. Yet they may not have the awareness or knowingness of those things for themselves. And they may know the situation per se, a work situation may be robbing them of sleep, but what's deeper underneath that that's creating such a level of fear or uncertainty within the actual circumstances. And that deeper component is what really truly allows us to have the freedom, but it's also the really challenging element to get in touch with without some support or tools.
Absolutely. And that's where people like yourself come in. It really is. I mean, whether it's a therapist or whether it's trauma, counseling or whatever that looks like, being able to, or a program or whatever, there's just so much available, which is fantastic now. But it really does need to be this niche. I think it really does need to be someone who understands these components, because it is very specific in some ways that what you're looking for, right?
Absolutely. When it comes to repressed memories or traumas specifically, people may be surprised to hear me say this. There is the ability to heal without knowing what that memory is. You can heal and not have to access all of the specific details and knowingness. It re-traumatizes people.
Right.
And my own personal story, I had my own experience with repressed memories, which really came out of the blue for me because I was none the wiser. I was obliviously walking around a hurt person, hurting people, unaware of anything that was going on. And it stemmed back to something that happened in my youth at a fairly young age, prior to the age of 10. And I would say as I went through my life path, I would classify myself as a rather unadjusted teen. I had a lot of strife in relationships, this overprotective sense of myself, afraid of getting hurt, wanting something deeper connection with individuals, yet feeling like I needed to keep them at an arm's length away, and not being able to really find that happy medium. I developed an eating disorder in my late teens and had an active anorexia bulimia issue for many years. I married young 1 year later, due in large to the eating disorder and dishonesty. I was divorced. So we can see how this played out, but I had no idea until I was in my 30s.
Right.
That I had something happen at such a young age that was interweaving all of these really challenging aspects into my life while I was just trying to cope, and I had no idea what I was trying to cope with. And so I accessed my memories unexpectedly and reverted back to essentially an 8-year-old child trying to process that event with all of these very childlike responses and emotions. And it was so confusing in an adult body too, let me tell you. So I didn't have the proper support that I really truly needed as that transpired in my life, but I did have some support, which was better than none at all. And I for sure had to work through and process through the re-traumatization that happened with having all of that come back to me. And when it came back, the events of that day, I was then looking for validation, talking to my family. I remembered all the details throughout the day, but still questioning, but did that really happen? And when everything else was accurate, I decided, okay, well, these memories must be accurate as well. But what happens with repressed memories is our being is trying to protect us. And so it says, let's not access this likely painful event. We're just going to block it out. But it doesn't block out the symptoms. So as we talked about with all of the symptoms, we still experience it and aren't sure where it's coming from. And then we walk through life experiencing all of our
Yeah.
trauma coping that we can grasp and reach and manage to try to use, which also doesn't heal the issue.
Right.
Now, blocking the memory to our conscious mind doesn't heal the issue, as we've stated, but also accessing the memory doesn't heal it either. Just
Right.
as I lived and as I experienced, having the knowingness of what happened didn't actually bring me any healing other than the awareness of then being able to start the healing journey. That's where the healing began, but it in itself did not bring me healing. So while our body has good intention of blocking out what our unconscious mind has stored and knows is in there or experienced, doesn't heal us, nor does accessing it.
Right.
So we use a different process with muscle testing. Have you ever heard of muscle testing?
Yes. So we
Yeah.
do this with or actually one of my oldest is dyslexic, and he spent a couple of years doing kind of like neuro reprogramming with an amazing therapist to work with him for an educational type. But she was also super gifted at muscle testing. It was such a gift to have someone who had some extras, you know? So she taught me a bit about that, and I got to watch her do that with him for simple things like supplementing and helping him out that way. So really cool. It kind of blew my mind the first few times I watched her do it, and then saw the results of following through with it. So yeah. So
It's
tell us
an,
more about that, because I know it's very unheard. Like there's a lot of moms and people who don't know much about that. So what does that look like?
it's an incredible tool, and it's our birthright. All of us have the ability to tap into this innate intelligence that we have within us. I'm fond of starting the explanation of muscle testing, although it has nothing to do with it really. But the innate intelligence that is within us when we are in utero and we are this little embryo, no one's telling us, oh, hey, you need to multiply your cells and grow bigger. We just do it. We know how to do it. And that same intelligence that created us also heals us. We can tap into that intelligence using this mind body connection. So we ask a binary question, yes, no, of our being, and our brain and nervous system will shoot an electrical message down to our muscles. And there's many ways to muscle test, for demonstration for those who watch this on YouTube, you can press on your forearm and ask for a yes, and the message is strong. You can ask for a no and it goes weak.
Yeah.
There's many ways to muscle test though. Essentially, you get that yes or no response from not your conscious mind, because your conscious mind only knows about approximately 10% of what's really going on within our unconscious, our soul, our body.
Yeah.
With the muscle testing and bypassing that conscious thinking to get into our innate intelligence, we then individualize what specifically does this person actually need to know and do to heal. And they may not need to know much of anything about it. They may just need to use some techniques to release that energy from their being. Or what they may release may open up to the fact that the symptoms that they were having while they thought it was from something traumatic, actually it's not from anything traumatic at all. So then it allows us to move into what is really truly at the root of the symptoms that they have. So not only do I work with the repressed memories, I also work with what I refer to as suspicion trauma, where we suspect something happened, but we don't really know. And our subconscious is able to reveal what it is that we do need to know so that we can move forward and rid ourselves of those symptoms and really truly be the beings we were created to be.
That's amazing. It's funny, I never thought of muscle testing for that purpose, and yet it makes complete sense. I think because we've only used it more in a supplemental form of, what am I needing at this point in my body, cellular or whatever, but on an emotional level too. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And muscle testing for supplements is really powerful. One of the first ways I was introduced to that as well. Some other great things once you learn muscle testing that I'm all about the tools for people to use on their own. Food sensitivities, what is causing this bloating or indigestion or whatever is going on. And instead of doing these super broad, extensive elimination diets, you can use it to weed out some of the foods that don't agree with you, or even the forms. For me specifically, cooked kale was great. Raw kale destroyed me. I didn't have to eliminate, a plethora of common foods I ate to figure that out with my muscle testing. It
Interesting.
just showed me,
So
cook your
tell
kale.
me, give me an example of that, because I want to do this. So give me an example of how I would do that, let's say with foods. How would I use muscle testing with foods to make that determination?
Is there something that you experience after you eat that's uncomfortable?
Yeah, so I can't eat grain at the moment. It's for the last year or so. It's been really hard on my body.
So looking at specifically what you experience when you say it's hard on your body, do you have aching? Do you have itching? Sometimes people have
Bloating and
bloating.
digestive issues. Yeah, pain, stomach pain. And yet there's no diagnosable issue. Like we've kind of gone down that road. But like you said, kind of like eliminating an entire thing drives me crazy, because then I'll, when we're in England and I eat European flour, not refined, sorry, there is less refined. So I can eat bread there and it doesn't bother me at all. But I eat it here and it does. It's the same, the exact same thing. So it just feels like this puzzle I don't feel like trying to figure out on my own, going through, like you said, eliminations and all those things. So I just carte blanche, just say, forget it. But that's not fun either.
Nope, it's not. Completely
Right.
understandable. I like to guide people to use as much specificity with their muscle testing as possible. That's why I was inquiring as to what exactly do you experience? After identifying that, the bloating, when you ask the question, you can start with food groups. Is it bread? Is it rice? Is it sorghum? Is it barley? I mean, there's so many grains out there.
Right. Yeah.
It's easiest to start looking at, if you keep a food journal, or if you just know, oftentimes our diets aren't that diverse that it's tricky to figure out. So is it this bread I ate? Is it wraps? Is it the rice in a bowl or whatever you're eating?
Right.
And just start going through, but yes or no, because we want a yes or no response. You have to test them one at a time.
Gotcha.
So that's where I sometimes like to start with bigger groups of food. Is it a flour? Is it wheat flour? Is it white flour? Is it oat flour?
Right.
And then you can narrow it down. So there's some different approaches. You can get really specific and just go through the foods you ate for the day. If you keep a food journal, that way is really simple too. But keep in mind, you want to seek out what is causing the symptom, not just the general, does this, fit well with my body or not?
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Perfect. I can totally do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll change a lot of things for me. Because again, it's one of those things that I think we look for the quick answer to when it comes to our bodies or our emotions or whatnot. We're just a culture of quick fixes. So putting, like you said, a food journal, I remember recommending that to a client of mine, and it was just a nope, can't do it. My life's too busy. I can't do it. Okay, I get it. But what can you do, right? What is one step you can take, kind of thing? And I think it's the same in this scenario when you're dealing with symptoms or repressed trauma that or you start to become aware of. It's those baby steps. Maybe it's just taking the step to talk to someone and say, I think this is what I'm dealing with. What do you think? What would you say are some good first steps for people who are starting to connect the dots, maybe through some of these podcasts over the last little bit? What would be a good first step, or where would we go from here if I'm starting to go, okay, I could see this benefiting me, or I could see how this works for me?
It's a great question. I feel as though, much like the food journal, beginning to track your symptoms. So what is it that's showing up in your life that's uncomfortable? What are you working with? What are you dealing with? Begin to track what your symptoms are and what's tipping you off. What are the clues? I also have a very pure heart for self-healing and giving people tools that they can use on their own. And while by and large, repressed memories, I don't encourage anyone to go down that road alone. Yes. I absolutely encourage them to seek a professional and to seek that guidance. However, when you're dealing with the symptoms, when you're dealing with the emotions, tapping is a huge tool that brings so much relief to stagnant energy that clogs up the nervous system with the overwhelming emotions that we experience, because life happens, daily life happens. We experience a lot from day to day, and having the tools to process just daily life can make the traumas that we're still needing to work through and process or release a little more balanced and tolerable, because we don't have the daily compounding emotions and stress, the inner stress. When I say stress, I'm not talking about the world around us stress. I'm talking about the inner stress that our bodies carry with us from what we experience day to day. So tapping, another tool I commonly use with clients, is simply holding the front, your forehead, and the back of your head. And this seems so simple, we think it probably won't do a whole lot, but there are points to the amygdala on our forehead, and our amygdala is our fight or flight center.
Yes.
Which is huge with traumas. When we have those trauma triggers, our brain activity, it was proven in a study and scan, showed that we're not able to differentiate today and the moment the trauma happened, which is why we have these big responses to trauma triggers. The brain can't differentiate between the difference, which engages our amygdala, the fight or flight, on a day-to-day basis, or a trauma trigger to trauma trigger basis.
Right.
Simply holding the front and back of our head for 3 minutes will help just process and calm and bring a little more clarity to what really is going on in present situation, versus all of the emotion and components that get stacked and stored in us with trauma that then gets triggered with the trauma triggers.
Yeah, there's a lot of triggers. That totally makes sense though too. I mean, it's funny. Like I told you in the beginning, I eat this information up because it's something that I've worked a lot with functional med doctors and psychologists over the years in my own business. And I mean, yourself as a functional medicine coach, energy psychologist, all that you bring to that. I wish there were more people doing this. I really do, because the world needs so much of that. But I did a tapping summit. Someone, I can't remember who it was, one of the famous tapping teachers, put on a free summit a few months ago. And I was like, yes, I'm in, because I want to understand this more and I want to know what the power of this is. And I actually got my kids involved. So we would do the practice work at bedtime. And so I'm kind of picking that one out, because those are very practical, doable things that we can learn to do. And you don't have to school for this. You can learn this quickly. Tell me, I want to go just a tiny bit into the tapping aspect. We don't have a ton of time, but this is big, because I have a 13-year-old who has struggled with anxiety, I swear, from the time he was conceived. A lot of trauma in our life at the time, marriage-wise, emotions, while I was pregnant with him, that I think, very directly affected who he is today. But he's done a lot of work, and as a 13-year-old, it blows me away that he's such a feeler, and he's my empath and the whole bit, but he's so keen to heal himself. He understands that how things in life have impacted him. So tapping was a big one for him, but he would ask me the questions like, well, why do we tap where we tap? What does that mean? Why do we say the things we say? So I think it's really powerful for people to understand something so simple. So give me even just like a tidbit. What is it with tapping? What is it why does it work, and what do you do with it?
Acupressure. I have to, just while it's top of mind, I have to share with your audience, this is such an important point that I make with all moms that ties directly into the tapping. As moms, there's so much pressure, at times, unrealistic pressure, that is placed upon themselves to give their children the life that they didn't have, and to essentially almost strive for protection, when we want to protect children from as much stuff as possible. Life happens, day to day, life happens. It's more important to have the tools and to teach our kids the tools to be able to process life day to day so they
Yes.
don't have the overwhelming traumas build up in their system. And so I cannot stress the importance of using these tools, which when you said that you got your kids involved, that brought that up for me in my mind. I'm sitting here saying, Holly, awesome, good work. Because
Yeah.
kids need these tools. And I have yet to even tap on a child 2 years or younger who doesn't completely sit still through the entire tapping, because even their little nervous systems bask in it. They're like, this feels amazing. Go ahead and tap on me.
Yeah.
And kids at that age will release things so much quicker.
Yeah.
Using those tools with your kids at any age, you can't start young enough. It does them so many favors. Okay, but why does it work? Let's get back to the question.
I want to know. Because in this, when we were learning this, it was more learning it for very specific uses and what we'd say and how we'd work through it. But it wasn't, I didn't get a lot about it, but why? And I want to know the science of it, or if there is the science that you can call it that.
There is science. Yeah. It's much like acupuncture without the needles. There's acupressure on the meridian points, which is an Eastern world philosophy that energy flows through our body in these certain channels and circuits and pathways, which are called meridians. And those meridians are attached to specific organs in our body, and those organs process and house different emotions. For instance, the kidneys and fear, the liver and anger, so on and so forth. For each place where you're applying the acupressure or tapping, you're releasing certain emotions from the meridians, those energy channels, the nervous system in the body. We have combined a couple different tapping techniques into one to encompass a greater amount of meridian points, and therefore to have a greater effect on what it is that it treats, from traumas, phobias, limiting beliefs, simply curbing food cravings you might be having, processing those negative emotions that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, resetting your internal clock. I just did a quick video with the time change each year, and parents talk to me about, well, I'm doing okay. It's not great. It's not comfortable. And I'm not quite on track, but my kids, are up super early or cranky, and it just throws everything off.
I'll make a note. So we're gonna get you back on in the spring before time change, okay?
For sure. Simply tapping
yeah,
can reset that inner clock. And it's great when you travel through time zones. There's so much that the tapping does for us. It's pretty mind-blowing. And so I have a tapping tutorial, and I'd be thrilled to share it with your audience for sure. Yeah. My clients, the more they tap, the more they report that they feel better. Amazing. So it's a great tool, especially for that.
Yeah, we definitely can repeat that. Like it was really neat to see, and for myself to feel personally how I felt that change and that shift. And I remember we started combining that with sound therapy, and I was like, what? I feel like I just opened it up to a whole new level.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything
I never would have thought I would have done before. Like I'm a very, science and logic minded person. And when you go into this other realm a little bit, I always felt like I was just playing with it. But when I actually experienced that, and it is very science-based in the sense of how our cells respond. Like you said, even from conception and growth, the way our body innately knows, and we are energetic beings. It's just how we work. So when you start to tap into this stuff, oh my goodness, it's just brilliant how your body jumps at it. Yeah.
Completely brilliant. It's a beautiful word. There's so much science to it. When we look at, from a functional medicine standpoint, of our sodium potassium pump is ran based upon an electrical charge in our body. The neurotransmitters that thoughts shoot through our body with an electrical charge. We are energy, and it's just using these tools which shift and adjust that energy to then shift and adjust our physical body, our thoughts, our emotions, everything going along with it.
That's amazing. Sorry, I had to mute myself because my kids started to wrestle. There's something happening outside my office. One of the things that I kind of will wrap it up with this, but one of the thoughts that I really loved hearing is that there's hope. And I don't know, I mean, we didn't say that out loud, but that as you thread through all the things that, you've brought to us today, the idea that there is hope. It could be, like we said, those mysterious symptoms. Maybe it's just something has come up and a memory has resurfaced, or something has triggered something else. Maybe it's talk therapy is not the route you want to take, whatever that looks like. The idea that there's still hope, that there are so many tools at our disposal, is that something that you see, in your work? Do you see that this brings people the ability to hope and to keep going and to find these answers?
It does for sure bring people hope. And even beyond that, it brings people a sense of empowerment, of doing things they never thought they could do, processing through situations they thought they were going to carry with them forever, have haunt them for the rest of their life, being able to reflect on something that's been so heavy and burdensome to them, and be neutral with it. And yeah, more than hope, there's truly empowerment of really feeling like I can do the hard things, and I can do them gracefully.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's so true. And when you take those steps and you actually put in the work, and for some things, like, mentioning just the little tools that I've pulled on over time, they were so easy to do. They're not, none of these were hard. It was just taking that moment to say, I need to heal. I need to be well. And, we always say, if mama's not healed up, there's going to be problems. If any of us aren't taking the time to heal up, put that oxygen mask on yourself first, so you can take care of the little people or anybody else in your life, right?
Yes. 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 Scream yes from the rooftops. These are regular conversations I have too. So you are very, very on point. I'd love to share just quickly one story with moms for hope and inspiration and empowerment. I had an individual bring their child for a session. And when they arrived, there was some tension on the drive over and some triggers in itself. They took a wrong turn. And the child was very distraught when they arrived and fearful. And while the session was scheduled for the child, we determined pretty quickly that mom needed some adjustment with energy first. And when we began, the child was running from wall to wall in the room and being pretty vocal, wanting that attention, which when kids want attention, there's usually something more underlying that. As we adjusted mom's energy, the child went from running wall to wall back and forth to sitting on an exercise ball, that you can use to sit at your desk, and bouncing on that. And the verbal beckoning for attention stopped. They were just bouncing, talking, but not wanting the attention, just talking out loud. We never redirected any behavior at any point in time. Within about 5 more minutes, they sat down. They slept through the remainder of the session, all by adjusting mom's energy. We're all connected, and the energy that we exude does elicit response from other people. As a mom, it's so easy to get caught up in, if I don't provide X, Y, or Z to my child, they're not going to have X, Y, or Z. But really making that choice to invest in self first. I use the exact same example, put your oxygen mask on first, does more good to the child than bypassing your own needs to give attention to what it is that the child is needing.
Absolutely. And that was a great illustration with that story. And that same atmosphere and energy happens in our homes. We actually have the power to positively or negatively affect the collective energy in our families. So yes to taking care of ourselves and to we can't control other people's energy. We can't determine for them what they're going to bring to the table per se. But we can show up with whatever heals us and the connections that we have. That is really powerful. I like that you shared that. That was amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So
we are living in a culture of change where we want to change all sorts of things. And typically that's the thing
other people.
Ourselves. Yeah.
It's easier to point the finger, right? And to say, well, you have this problem. If you would only change. And the reality is we could just look at ourselves first.
Right. If we heal us, things around us start changing. And the true key is going within and focusing on what we can heal. And it's not even a matter of changing ourselves. We're healing ourselves. Throw change out the window, like change the channel, change the setting on the treadmill. People don't need to change. When we want people to change, we're saying that they're inadequate as they are. So let's heal. And the ripple effect that comes with that is nothing but beautiful.
Absolutely. I've experienced little bits of it. I 100% agree. So there's lots more to go, I'm sure. If we wanted to work with you in some form, what would that look like? Or how can we, find out more about what it is that you offer?
When are you airing this episode? So I know I meant to ask that before.
Probably soon. So that's okay. It'll be before the end of the year. It'll be in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if it was January, I would have a different answer for you.
Oh, I gotcha. So we'll just visit it again. I can always put up a reminder in January and repost and say, if you have any offers or things like that you want us to bring attention to.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Happy to do that. Yeah. But at the moment, all your links will be up and all that good stuff.
So there's two ways to access me. One is for individual work, and you can jump into my Facebook business page, contact me through that, or through my website, email, lots of ways to find me. The other way to access me is through the community that is built within Facebook. And I go live once a week and offer little mini guided healing, tapping, all sorts of different sessions to bring relief to people. And that would be another way to access my services with the group setting. So group or individual are both available.
Perfect. And at a distance, it doesn't always have to be in person.
No, we all are able to muscle test ourselves. So virtual is real and alive before COVID ever hit.
That's right. I love it. We didn't invent, COVID didn't invent that. We did.
That's right.
Online forever. I love it. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I know we could go so much further with this conversation, and I really do hope we can do more of this. We'll probably pull out some really specific things in the future, and we can, like I said, time change. We'll just get back to that in the spring. We should have done that ahead of time. If I had known, I would have grabbed you earlier, but now we know. We're going to work on some time change things next year. So
I have a video on my Facebook page so people can jump in and access the time change thing all on their own. And yeah, I would love to come back and get into anything more specifically, or even jump over to the functional side of stuff.
Yeah.
So many possibilities. So
definitely it fits right in with what we do every day. I love it. Perfect. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate your time, and we'll chat some more soon.
Thank you, Holly.
Would you like to learn more? Find me on Instagram and YouTube at Mom Days Podcast.